Joined by Nerdeen Kiswani, the activist and founder of the Palestinian community organisation Within Our Lifetime, and by the journalist and broadcaster Emily Austin. Well, welcome to both of you. Nerdeen, let me start with you, if I may. There's a pause at the moment. It's been extended by 2 more days. There are hostages being released back to Israel. There are prisoners being released back to the Palestinians. What is your view of where things should move from here?
I think it's important that when we talk about hostages to also understand that there are thousands of Palestinian prisoners that have been held in Zionist dungeons and Zionist prisons for years and years. And it's important that they are also freed, and that the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza, which is effectively a concentration camp, are also being held hostage. So I think all hostages should be freed when we look at the context of Palestinians, prisoners, and not to call them hostages, but understanding that it's, you know, the same kind of line of thinking.
All right, Emily Austin, I mean, the thing about the Palestinian prisoners who've been in Israeli jails, I was shocked by not necessarily the age of so many of them, because I knew that a lot of young teenagers in particular had been rounded up for throwing rocks at soldiers and so on. But the fact that so many are being held in detention without charge, that makes me feel very uncomfortable. Are you comfortable with that?
Most of the prisoners that were part of this exchange were actually tried and, you know, convicted of the crimes, most of them being attempted murder. There is a narrative going around that there hasn't been fair trials, that they haven't been convicted, but that's simply not true. And there's one in particular that's going very, very viral on Twitter of Ahmed al-Mansra, who was convicted at 12 years old. This is a photo of him then, a photo of him now, and they're saying that he was abused in Israeli prisons. But if you look closely, you could see him stabbing 2 civilians at 14 years old. And a lot of them are calling this kid innocent just because he's a child. But at 14 years old, if you're stabbing civilians, you might be a child, but you're definitely not innocent. And contrary to what Nerdeen just said, there is no equivalency. This is not a hostage exchange. This is an exchange of criminals for children. Okay, these are babies who are being held captive for someone who tried to stab a soldier. Another baby for another woman who tried to stab a soldier. Another baby whose crime was being a Jew versus another woman who tried to stab another soldier. Versus another baby whose crime is being an Israeli who was released for a woman who tried to stab a soldier. So I'm sorry, this is not a hostage exchange. This is a criminal exchange for our civilians back who were taken out of their homes.
Okay, Nerdeen, respond to that.
Thousands of Palestinians are held under administrative detention, which, as you said, means that they don't even get charged with anything, let alone a fair trial, and that these administrative detentions can be renewed every 6 months. And even when Palestinians are tried, oftentimes Palestinians are tried in military courts, and there's a 99% or higher than 99% conviction rate of Palestinians being tried in military courts. Children are not tried in military courts anywhere else around the world. On top of that, Palestinians get 20 years just for throwing stones.
Right, Nerdeen, let me ask you about this question of a permanent ceasefire. Israel have just made it clear to me through their government spokesman they've got absolutely no intention of having any ceasefire. This war continues in their eyes until they have defeated Hamas. What is your response to that?
Is the murder of 20,000 Palestinians, 8,000 of them being children, not enough? You know, I think that no matter what they say, no matter who they're going after, there's always going to be Palestinian resistance. So that argument is essentially saying that they're never going to stop killing Palestinians and that they're completely justified in doing so.
Would you categorize,
I mean, look at the disparity between the rhetoric.
Would you categorize what happened on October the 7th as resistance?
Sorry, I didn't hear your...
Would you categorize what happened on October the 7th as resistance?
I would categorize it as resistance. And it's not my categorization where that's coming from.
It's terrorism.
Is there any categorization of Palestinian resistance, armed resistance, that you wouldn't categorize as terrorism?
I think when several thousand people storm,
wouldn't categorize?
I think when several thousand people storm over a border.
Well, hang on, let me just respond.
I think when several thousand people storm over a border and attack peace-loving people in kibbutzes and butcher them to death raking people's heads off, killing babies,
Many of those
incinerating
people were killed by Israel itself.
But that is,
Israel
Nerdeen,
actually,
we have to
came
agree.
out that Israel incinerated a 12-year-old,
Fine, we have
a
to
12-year-old
agree, though,
Israeli girl.
before
It
we
was
get
Israeli
to
tanks that
But before
incinerated
we
them.
get to Israel's response, you must accept that what happened that day was an act of terrorism, surely.
I don't live in a concentration camp, and neither do you, and neither does Emily. I haven't lived under the brutal conditions that the people of Gaza have had to endure for the better part of the last 2 decades. It's not up to me to tell people who are breaking free from a concentration camp how exactly they should do that.
All right,
and
Emily.
like I said, when Palestinians tried to do that
This is the
peacefully in
concentration
2018,
camp
they
that
were
she's
shot at.
referring
Right,
to.
let
This is
Emily
Gaza.
respond.
This is a very beautiful concentration camp that is Gaza, and it's a damn shame that Hamas terrorists are invading this very beautiful looking concentration camp. If only the Jews were that lucky to have such a beautiful concentration camp. Nerdeen, listen. Piers, let's cut to the chase.
I can't
Stop
see
asking
photos
her
of
to
what's
condemn
being
October 7th.
shared, so
Stop
this
asking her to
is,
condemn
not-
October
this is not
7th when
fair.
she is borderline a terrorist herself. She herself incites violence. She herself protests and always incites violence and vandalism, even though vandalism is not protected by our First Amendment. So how do you expect her to condemn terrorism when she has openly said that it is an act of resistance and she continues to justify
Meanwhile,
it?
you're the one
and I
on
also
national
want to say,
TV
Nerdeen,
defending the
Nerdeen, I'm
murder
not
of
done
8,000
speaking.
Palestinian
I'm not done
children.
speaking. I was
I don't
about to
care
say
about
it
you
is a
speaking.
damn
I'm not
shame.
here to debate you.
And I don't care about you either. And I'm here to say, I'm just going to keep speaking.
Clearly
Every
you care
single
about me.
life
You're
that is
tagging me
lost by
speaking
the
about
Don't talk
media
over each
all
other,
the
please.
time.
Every